Okay, I'd like to call to order the Tuesday, March 5th, 2024 regular meeting of the East Lansing City Council. Could we have the roll call at the opening of the meeting, please?
Councilmember Altman.
Here.
Councilmember Meadows.
Here.
Councilmember Watson.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Singh.
Here.
Mayor Brookover.
Here. Do we have a motion to approve or amend the agenda?
So moved.
Motion to approve. Okay.
Second.
Is there a second? All right. Thank you. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? Agenda is approved unanimously. Item 1.3, approval of the minutes of the regular council meeting of February 20th, 2024, and the City Council Strategic Planning Session meeting of February 23rd, 2024. Do we have a motion?
Mayor, I'll move the approval of both those sets of minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, the motion passes unanimously. Communications, all written communications received by council have been posted on the online agenda packet. Are there any communications from the audience? Seeing none, do we have anybody in the queue?
There are no callers in the queue.
Okay, seeing none, we will move on to communications from Yeah. Come on up to the podium, please. And after you get done, if you'd fill out a blue sheet.
Okay.
And so go ahead.
My name is Mike Stout. I'm with Michigan Waterway Stewards, and I'm here to speak about the matter of spin. The problem is spin lithium-ion powered batteries, scooters, being tossed and abandoned in the Red Cedar has been a conversation of the greater Lansing community since their introduction in 2021. Spin is a logistics company. They manage a fleet of leased electric scooters. They know the last user of each leased scooter. They know the location of each scooter at all times. And the number and location of the last spin scooter to the last Red Cedar. Lithium batteries are regulated as a hazardous material under the U.S. Department of Transportation. There are specific rules regulating their disposal. The abandonment of spin scooters to the Red Cedar River is not an accepted practice. We have retrieved 225 electric scooters and 120 bicycles from the Red Cedar River since the beginning of November of 2022. We estimate that 191 are spin. We do not know how many remain. Our retrieval rate far exceeds spin's reported loss rate. When we attempted to reach out to spin in January of 2023 to offer our support, we were politely declined. And in July of 2023, to learn of the loss rate and location, we did not receive a response at all. And that was when we discovered in over 2 weekends, 70 scooters and additional bicycles. They simply did not respond. We are not aware when Spin notified the city of East Lansing about the enormity of the problem of their lost scooters to the river. We are not aware of those collaborative efforts between the city and Spin to solve this problem and other spin-related complaints. Via our consumer research of 160 residents, conversations with other area residents, and with city and university officials, we have learned that spin-related problems are far greater than just those related to the Red Cedar River. This is the reason why this matter is being brought in front of the City Council. Ultimately, Spin is solely responsible for all matters regarding the product and their company's performance, solely them. They should have a sense of awareness and understanding of the city and its residents' satisfaction or lack thereof. When there's a problem or need for improvement, Spin should be taking the lead to achieve alignment and to seek to quickly solve. The problem of spin scooters being tossed and abandoned to our rivers is not unique to East Lansing nor the Red Cedar. No one knows this better than Spin. We wonder what Spin is doing to make their other government and college partners aware of this problem across the country and across the globe, if anything at all. What is and where is their prepared plan to solve? So because of the spin-related problems that have led us today, and not just to those lost and abandoned to the Red Cedar River, because of the apparent misalignment with spin in this city, and because there's so much more work needed to be done, we cannot support any recommendation for the continued leasing of spin or any brand of electric scooters in the city of East Lansing. We encourage the council to act in a manner that is in the best interest of our treasured Red Cedar River and for the greater community, and to permanently revoke their license to operate.
Thank you for coming tonight. Communications from, okay, we have a caller in the queue now.
Caller with the number ending in 797, you're welcome to address council. Caller, you may need to unmute your phone.
Okay, let's move along to communications from the mayor and council members. Ms. Singh?
Yes, I want to welcome, well, not here tonight, I want to welcome President Kevin Guskowitz and his wife, Amy, who have joined the East Lansing and MSU community as he starts his presidency at Michigan State University. So very excited about the promise of the new president's administration and moving both this university as well as our community forward. And that's it.
Ms. Watson?
I don't have anything, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Meadows?
Well, I echo the welcome that was just provided to the new president. I think it starts a new era for us, hopefully an era of cooperation between the city and the university, maybe even more than we've seen in the past. And again, welcome. That's my whole comment.
Dr. Altman?
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to make a pitch for those here and those who may be listening to consider becoming poll workers in our elections. We have a lot of elections coming up. We had one last week, and I was a poll worker for that. We have elections in May and August, and of course in November. And it's a long day, but the time passes pretty quickly because there's enough stuff to do, and it's fun. You get to meet your neighbors and make new friends. It turns out that if you sit beside somebody working with them for 16 hours, the conversation can range over a lot of different topics, and you get to learn something about people. And the clerk and her staff are a crack team, and so they offer a lot of support. So you're not left in the lurch if you have issues come up. There's a phone number you can call and you can get immediate help. And it turns out that it's important to have both major parties represented at the polls, because a lot of functions that happen at the polls have to be done in tandem by members of both parties. That's part of the integrity of the election process. And it turns out that one party is a little bit overrepresented and another party is a little bit underrepresented in East Lansing. And so if you happen to find yourself affiliated with the underrepresented party, know that you are appreciated as a poll worker. And so I would encourage people to call the clerk's office to find out if this might be something for you. Thank you.
I'm going to depart from my usual silence just to indicate last night had the honor and privilege of attending the mayor's Unity Ramadan dinner, which was an astonishing dinner, and approximately 300 people turned out down in Lansing, and they raised around $25,000. Well, they raised $25,000 for the food bank, which is the beneficiary of the event. And it's a remarkable dinner, and of course it usually is held after the end of Ramadan, but this year it was held intentionally before the beginning of Ramadan, which starts on, I think it's March 10th, and goes for approximately 30 days. So I just wanted to mention that, and just another indication of the diversity of this community. City Manager's report.
I just want to congratulate and thank the city clerk, the staff, and all the poll workers for a job well done at the presidential primaries this past Tuesday.
City Attorney report.
There's nothing to report this evening, thank you.
Okay, next item is the consent agenda.
So the consent agenda has 7 items. The first item is 3.1, approve the following appointments or reappointments to boards or commissions. First one is to appoint Jordan Parker to the Housing Commission for a full term ending December 31st, 2027. Second one is to appoint Tiffany Stanl to the Housing Commission for a partial term ending December 31st, 2025. And the third one is to appoint Abby Taikaki to the Housing Commission for a partial term ending December 31st, 2025. Second item on the consent agenda is approve street closure request for Izzo Run Walk to be held on Saturday, April 20th, 2024, from 9 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Street closures would include the eastmost lane on Harrison Road, southmost lane on Michigan Avenue, and the one eastbound lane on Grand River. 3.3 is to approve renaming the art studio at Hannah Community Center to the Kelly Arndt Art Studio. 3.4 is to approve a resolution honoring the holy month of Ramadan in the city of East Lansing. 3.5 is reschedule a public hearing from March 5th, 2024 to April 9th, 2024 to consider Ordinance 1528, a proposed R01 residential rental restriction overlay district for a portion of Glen Caron neighborhood. 3.6 is approve a resolution accepting a housing readiness incentive grant in the amount of $48,600 from the Michigan State Housing Development Authority to fund comprehensive plan update activities. And 3.7 is the first reading of Ordinance 1503, amendments to the East Lansing Independent Police Oversight Commission, and set a second reading for March 19th, 2024.
Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
I have a discussion.
Okay.
Sorry. This is about the final agenda item. Sorry, I closed up my laptop for a little bit. On the changes to the Police Oversight Commission ordinance. There was some back and forth between council members regarding maybe additional information that should have been provided on where this came from. Unlike the ordinance change that the Youth Commission that we'll see at some point, the Youth Commission was well aware that it was happening. But our Police Oversight Commission, unfortunately, once again, was caught off guard by something that was put on our agenda item. And, you know, when we don't have the pieces, we try to put the pieces together ourselves. And it's not always, it doesn't always come out to be truths, and it, you know, comes out to people feeling that things have been done unfairly or secretly or something like that. And so I just was wondering if there was any background that the attorney or city manager would like to add to why this is on the consent agenda.
Before he talks, can I
Yeah.
say something? Because I would just like to thank you for bringing that up. I think a little more context on this would have eliminated a lot of issues, and I think 2 council members anyway who are associated with LAPOC weren't sure what we can actually say about this, given how it came to us to be proposed. So anything you can do to sort of clear up the air would be good.
Sure, absolutely. And so the concern about it is because it does arise from some pending litigation that we have, that our Labor Council has, Gary Sashatal, and she can kind of give a high-level explanation of that, if you would, Gary.
Thanks for coming tonight, Counselor.
You're welcome. Good evening, Council. So just briefly, background, there is a pending dispute between the city and one of its police unions, the Capital City Labor Program Non-Supervisory Unit. And the gist of the dispute is whether or not IPOC, the provisions of the ordinance or aspects of how IPOC functions are subject to collective bargaining with the union. The city's position is that they are not. The union's position is that they are. The city filed an unfair labor practice with the Michigan Employment Relations Commission in 2022 to seek clarification from that body as to whether or not there is a bargaining obligation over aspects of IPOC. And in connection with that disputed matter, the main dispute, or at least one of the main disputes between the parties, is whether or not IPOC has disciplinary authority over members of the police department, because the law allows or requires bargaining if there's a body that has disciplinary authority over bargaining unit members. The function of IPOC has never been to act in a disciplinary capacity over members of the ELPD. That was the understanding when IPOC was enacted. Nothing in IPOC in the ordinance gives IPOC the authority to discipline employees, but there is some ambiguity in the sense that the ordinance does not clearly prohibit IPOC from disciplining employees. And that ambiguity was sort of the crux of the dispute between the parties. So in order to resolve that, and in order to essentially codify what's already happening in practice, which is that IPOC does not have a disciplinary role, the amendments were suggested, and that's what you see in the revised ordinance, is just making clear that IPOC has no disciplinary authority.
And the unfair labor practice is a public record on file with the state of Michigan, Michigan Employment.
Michigan Employment Relations Commission.
MERC. Okay.
Yes.
Right. Okay. Any further discussion on the consent agenda?
Could I just follow up, since we're talking about this? I want to echo the comments of the previous council members that if we had had a brief summary of this on the agenda item report, if that made sense, I think that would have helped all of us and also the community sort of figure out what this was about. So maybe if this kind of thing comes up again in the future. I also had a question about why this is ordinance 1503. 1503 was the original ordinance, right, that created IPOC, I think. And this would be an ordinance to amend that, so shouldn't it be a higher number?
Yeah, so I was just speaking about that issue with the clerk overall earlier today. And so I do believe we will make sure that this is provided a new number so that there is historical perspective from when 1503 was originally adopted and exactly what it said, as opposed to the superseding number of the amendment. And as it relates to your underlying question, or your first question there, absolutely. We will make sure we try to provide a basic context. Obviously, when it's involving pending litigation, we're sensitive to that, but we want to be as transparent as possible always, and we'll work on that.
And does the change in the ordinance number affect whether this is a first reading or second reading, or is that tangential to this?
No, I don't believe that's a concern, because the way that the charter is written, I believe that it specifically notes that an amendment to an ordinance or a new ordinance are both considered a new ordinance and are given a new number.
Okay, thank you.
Anything further? All those in favor of the consent agenda say aye. Aye. All those opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Moving on to the business agenda. Item 4.1, consideration of a contract with Tetra Tech, Inc. for the design of the Coleman Road Pump Station in an amount of $169,000 and authorize the city manager to sign.
All right, good evening, Council. Scott House, Director of Public Works. The item before you is a contract to be awarded to recommend award to Tetra Tech to make improvements to the Coleman Road Pump Station. It's located at Shearwater. It was constructed in 2001. We have had performed various surveys of it, and there's work that needs to be done to replace pumps, improve controls, add emergency power, and other improvements. We released an RFP. We received 4 responses. Tetra Tech was unanimously approved by the selection committee. We're recommending a 5% contingency, and we recommend that council award this contract for the design of the improvements to the pump station, subject to your questions.
Any questions? Can we have a motion? Oh, go ahead.
Is this, so it's been 23 years since it was built. Is this a regular life cycle? It doesn't seem like that was that long ago.
Typical pump station infrastructure is about 20 years. And one thing that happened here, this was not built with emergency power to begin with. And controls, they have a life cycle, exposed equipment decays. So there were issues identified before, and this is just putting those recommendations into action.
Great. Okay, anything else? Can we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
A motion to approve the contract for the design of the Coleman Road Pump Station in an amount of $169,000 and to authorize the city manager to sign, made by Meadows, supported by Singh. Any discussion, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Item 4.2, consideration of ordinance 1532, amendments to the East Lansing Youth Commission ordinance. Do we have a motion?
I would like to move to defer consideration of this item to the March 19th business meeting.
Second.
Okay.
And if I can just briefly address the
Sure.
motion. So this was actually another case where some additional context on the agenda item report would have been helpful for us and for the community to know why this was being proposed, who wanted it, who wanted the changes, and why they wanted the changes. It turns out that there were some, I think, errors and miscommunications in developing the proposed changes to the ordinance, and I think we're on top of them now, but it makes sense to take a couple of weeks and allow the Youth Commission some additional input to the ordinance before we decide on it.
Yeah, if I can follow up on that. I think there's a numbering issue with this that we can resolve. And in addition, I got a call from one council member who suggested a potential language change, and we have a meeting of the Youth Commission on the 11th, and I'd like to bring that to their attention to see what they say before we go any further on this. Okay.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion to defer to March 19th, the consideration of ordinance 1532, amendments to the East Lansing Youth Commission ordinance, please say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 4.3, consideration of a contract with Top Notch Tree Care, LLC, for the annual street tree block pruning contract in an amount of, I couldn't make this up, of $246,547 and authorize the city manager to sign. Oh, there you are.
Council? Hello? Yes, Cliff Walls, DPW. I have a lot of information before you on the agenda item report, so I'll try to keep this brief, but ultimately this is, like I said, a block pruning program. It is to proactively perform structural pruning and weight reduction and other proactive measures to handle issues before they become hazards or emergencies. It's much more effective and cost efficient as well. But I'm happy to answer any questions, but this is this would be the not to exceed figure. It's a unit price, and we know it's going to be quite a bit less than this because there'll be some trees that are recently pruned, or maybe it's not worth investing in. There's going to be some that we're going to discover that are dead. And also that 1,200 tree unit was an estimate. It's based off a 2017 figure. So it was just there to level the playing field for quoting.
Okay, and the the gravamen of this is really your second paragraph of your information, which is, quote, unlike utility pruning focused on preventing interference with overhead lines, this program focuses on structural pruning, end weight reduction, young tree training forming, and other proactive care measures that improve the health and lifespan of the tree and the urban canopy's resilience to extreme weather, end quote. So my question is, this is not the Board of Water and Light pruning. This is us pruning other trees that the Board of Water and Light does not have the responsibility to take care of. Is that correct?
There'll probably be some overlap because they do prune some of our city street trees,
Okay.
but they have a very specific goal in mind, and that's either 6 foot or 10-foot clearance. The goal of this is to make sure there's expert eyes in every tree on a routine cycle, and to make sure that we're giving them the best shot to grow to maturity. We have plenty of these trees that don't get trained when they're young. They get co-dominant leaders, poor unions, and then 50 years later, they fail at the ultimate point of benefit to the community. And so by investing in them young and continuing that maintenance throughout their lifespan, they're going to be more resilient. We're going to lose less to decay. There's a lot of these overextended trees where you may lose one branch. You have a vector point that's going to cause decay, and you're going to lose that tree maybe decades before you otherwise would. By taking that down cleanly, having a clean cut, you can avoid a lot of those headaches and hazards.
Okay, so my next question is, in your materials, I think this is part of the bid document, you have an Appendix A map of tree pruning areas.
Correct.
And several of the council members over the last several years have had complaints from our neighbors and friends about the BWL tree pruning. So I don't find this a very informative map. And do you have plans to somehow post a map on the website that accurately illuminates even single trees in an area that are going to be pruned?
Yeah, so recommendations is we'll work with the neighborhood presidents, the neighborhood associations, send out mailings to everyone, and then likely door hangers as well. We want to be very clear with people that this is not what they're used to hearing. When they hear pruning, this is tree care. Pruning is a component of that, but this is not something necessarily to be scared of in the same capacity.
Can you put on the website, and how many years is this going to take?
7 years per cycle. It's about 15%.
Can you put on the website a readable, legible map so that the neighborhood associations, the neighborhood presidents can look at the map, even though you have door tags and all this other stuff, can look at the map and tell their members of their association, these are the trees that Cliff is going to come and work on in the next 3 months or 6 months or whatever?
Absolutely.
Okay, you can do that.
Yes,
And you will do that.
absolutely.
Okay. Other questions?
Another component, just to add to that, is that it should be every tree. Even if it's young, we want to do some training. So, they may be very minor, but there should, for the most part, the vast majority of trees will have some sort of work. That may be just a minimal assessment, but they will likely, the intent is to have eyes and assessment on all.
Cliff, I love you like a son, but if you show up and you do anything to that Princeton elm that you planted in my front right away, we're going to have some words.
I got you.
So, okay? All right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just want to confirm that we're really talking about trees that are on city property or on the city's easement, so that people know that, the tree in the middle of their front yard is not something that we're going to be messing with. Is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I just think this is a great program, and it's one of those things you look at and you go, this is so obvious, why haven't we been doing it forever? So I'm glad we're doing it now. I was curious, and I was delighted to see our shiny new strategic priority mentioned in there about decarbonization and adaptation. So thanks for your input on that. One question is, how did you pick the 7-year cycle? Is that sort of optimal?
It is pretty much standard. In 2004, Davey Tree. It's a forestry consulting company. They do a lot of work for municipalities throughout the country, especially in the state. And they had made that recommendation to the city of East Lansing to institute a 7-year block pruning program. So that was 20 years ago when there was an actual recommendation. And then we've been communicating with them and asked them, well, is it better to do 5? Is it better to do 7, 10? 7 is kind of that sweet spot because 5 is fairly aggressive on budgets, of course. 10 may be a little bit too long. We don't want to extend it too long, but you also want to give the tree a chance to grow. So you're coming back when there's another limb or overextended limb to prune. So you're going to have to get that delicate balance. But 7 is very typical, and it's still a recommendation that we received.
And then my other question was how this sort of interacts with tree replacement programs. So as you mentioned, you're going to find some trees that are dead. There's also an issue, which I heard from a couple of people last fall. Not all trees are the best trees in the best place. And so we've heard a little bit of suggestion that maybe some trees need to be replaced with better trees for what's there. So how does this overlap or dovetail with other programs that we have for replacing trees that are dead or inappropriate?
Yeah, so I had hoped to have our planting contract on the same meeting, but that's going to be likely the 19th or the 18th. We're still negotiating those details with our, the applicants or the submittals at this point. But the intention and the path we're on is to aggressively increase the amount of plantings we're doing. We did get a DNR grant to design a tree standards of practice manual. And so that has specifications, new recommendations, all based in science, the Arboriculture Society standards as well. And so we have now backing to guide these contractors and these contracts. And so we're in that really good position now to implement it, especially with new staff that we've brought on board as well to help oversee some of this. And so that is going to occur at the same time. And we're hoping to aggressively increase the numbers of our plantings and also care for them better too, including ongoing watering during their establishment period. So there's a lot of momentum on trees in the city of East Lansing right now. As a resident myself, I'm very excited about it. As a DPW employee, I'm also very excited about it. But that is definitely the next step because we know that there's a lot of trees out there that are mature, that people like, and that we're going to discover some problems with them through this pruning program. But we don't want to leave people in a situation where there's we want to have that next phase of our urban canopy.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Could we have a motion?
I'll move approval of the contract with Top Notch Tree Care LLC for the annual street tree block pruning contract in an amount of $246,547 and authorize the city manager to sign.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Item 4.4, consideration of spin revocation hearing officer's recommendation. I would just point out to council that in the memo from Mr. Chubb, depending on the council deliberations, there's a suggested motion in the last paragraph of that memorandum. So, Mr. Chubb, are you on deck? Are you at bat here? Thank you.
All right, so as council is aware, after you read this, Spin Scooters operates, it's actually Skinny Labs Incorporated that does business as Spin Scooters operates the battery-powered scooters that are present throughout much of the downtown area. As a result of multiple perceived violations by administration, including deployment of them in proper locations within the city, failure to remove them and relocate them between the hours of 3 and 6 a.m. as they're required to do, and impeding or interfering with access to sidewalks. The city manager, at the recommendation of city staff, issued a license revocation on September 28th, 2023. Under our ordinances, when that occurs, a license holder is allowed to appeal, which Spin timely did. Under those ordinances, the mayor appoints a hearing officer. It was former Mayor Bacon appointed Tom Lapka. We did have a hearing that was held on February 16th, 2020. I'm sorry, it was held in January of 2024, and the hearing officer subsequently issued the report that you have attached on February 16th, 2024. And so under Ordinance 8-67, upon receipt, and this is a quote, upon receipt of the hearing officer's report and proposed decision, the City Council may reject, modify, or stay the action within 28 days of receipt of the report. Otherwise, the hearing officer's decision shall become final, and that's end quote.
Okay.
So this is before you today for deliberations to determine how to move forward with his proposed revocation.
And for council's edification, after reading the decision and looking at the ordinance and discussing with the city attorney, I was of the opinion that doing nothing probably would implicate a decision on the part of the council without making a decision. And so I requested that Mr. Chubb draft a motion, if you're inclined to essentially adopt the findings of the hearing officer, then we would have that on the record indicating that in fact we approved them. So that's why we're at where we're at tonight. Mr. Meadows?
I do have a question. Looking at the motion, I'm just not sure why we would provide that it would not take effect for 7 days. And is that a requirement that of this particular action?
That is not, and it actually, I was working with ELPD and DPW because we need to give them adequate time to take these scooters away, and otherwise we will impound them all, and we have come up with a plan for that, but it's going to take a little bit of time to effectuate that and to make sure we're prepared to do it.
Okay.
Any other questions? I move. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Do we just have one scooter contract per, scooter company or whatever?
I'm sorry.
Do we just have one scooter contract? Are there other scooter companies?
Yes, it is my understanding there are other scooter companies that will continue to operate, and so we will not, we will still have a supplier.
So who are the other companies?
I believe the other is Razor. I may need some assistance on the names of them.
Lime, okay.
I'm not sure if they have an active.
Yeah, the question is who else is licensed in the city at this point in time?
Yeah, so I believe it's Lime. It's a little bit confusing because Skinny Labs and Spin, there are several other organizations that all operate under multiple DBAs, and so it is our understanding, though, that we do have another operator and we will have continued operations in the city.
And the other companies didn't get into anywhere near as many problems?
Based upon everything that I've received from economic development and from our other witnesses at Cliff as well, that we did not see anything like that from the other providers.
Okay. And terminology-wise, as Mayor Brookover was saying, we could have just let this sit and then it would have been revoked. But the motion says permanent, and so if we had just let this sit and if we hadn't made a motion, was it still going to be permanent?
Yes.
So the recommendation was for permanent revocation. I just wanted to be clear because it can also be a license suspension versus a permanent revocation under our ordinance, which would be a suspension for a set period of time.
But when we revoke, it's permanent.
That is correct for this applicant.
Okay, any other questions?
I do have one more question.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Mayor. I want to go back to this lithium battery issue. Do we have an action that we can take? This would be, I think, based on what we heard a little bit earlier, an unlawful disposal of the lithium batteries into the river. And I believe we have jurisdiction in that particular location. So I'm wondering whether we have either a referral to the Attorney General's office or someplace else that that we might be able to make on that.
Sure, so that is separate and distinct from this
This
item,
issue.
as you understand, but yes, I know that Cliff and several of the other community members are working on that and trying to determine who would have jurisdiction for seeking bigger sanctions as a result of what was found in the river.
Okay, thank you.
I move that we adopt the findings of the hearing officer report that Spin violated ordinance sections 8-610, paren 12, end paren, 8-610, paren 13, end paren, and 8-615, paren 1, end paren, small a, end paren, and that permanent license revocation is therefore proper, and to further move that it becomes effective midnight on the 7th day following the adoption of this motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Okay, is 7 days reasonable?
I think within 7 days, they will have adequate time to pick up all of their scooters, and it also gives us time to put into place the necessary measures to be able to pick up those remaining scooters that they do not pick up.
Okay. Permanent is just a really long time for me, so I guess we'll see how the vote goes, but I think suspension of 5 to 7 years gives a company time to get it back together again, and also leaves space for whatever happens in the world, and maybe there's just 2 scooter companies or something like that. But I'll be voting no because of the permanency. But if anybody else is open to a 5 to 7 year suspension, then I would make that motion.
Okay, well, I'm not for these reasons. First of all, somebody dumped over 200 of their scooters in the Red Cedar River. And I'm not interested in doing business any longer with a company that allowed that to happen. Secondly, I think they're in bankruptcy, are they not? Mr. Chubb?
That is correct. They are currently in Chapter 11 bankruptcy, which is why we stepped away from any financially based revocation or suspension basis.
So in other words, we didn't implement a fine or anything like that. So I think we've gone through the necessary due process under the ordinance that was established. There are other companies available, and I just don't want to do business with this particular company anymore because I don't think they did a very good job of taking care of their equipment. So I understand your point, Ms. Watson, but I disagree with you respectfully. So.
If I could add one thing, we aren't the only city this has happened in with Spin. And across the country, they have had this same failure with their contract and their licensing.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Okay, motion passes 4-1. Councilperson Watson voting the nay. Okay, next item on the business agenda is consideration of policy resolution 2024-5, adding 2 budget work sessions to the City Council 2024 meeting schedule. Mr. City Manager.
Sure, I'm asking to establish April 16th, 2024 and April 23rd, 2024 as budget work sessions to commence at 5 p.m. And conclude prior to the start of any scheduled City Council meetings on those dates.
And it's a little difficult for me to keep track of the back and forth on this, but I assume that this is as a result of your communications with various council members in terms of all of their calendar issues?
Yes, this balances the need for more information on fewer days.
And also takes into consideration staff needs?
Yes.
Okay. I think we need a motion. Do we have a motion? Moved by Councilmember Meadows that we adopt policy resolution 2024-5 entitled Resolution Scheduling Budget Work Sessions for April 16th, 2024 and April 23rd, 2024. Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Could we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Councilmember Watson, seconded by Councilmember Altman. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion adjourn, say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. The council is adjourned.
45 minutes. Well
Thanks,
done.
folks. Thanks for coming.